27 years.
What worried me about it, and maybe this didn't worry you about it, as you're saying, but I was thinking, well, I hope people aren't taking this the wrong way and actually following a path in their own lives, thinking this is how I become a high value man. Bullet, okay, let me check it off. You'd be surprised. There's some brain deads out there. I mean, I'm sorry to say,
and
but
you know
that's
what
true.
those brain deads need to do? Get a vasectomy, because we don't need you replicating.
You know it is good advice.
That's what we need. We need you to take yourself out of the genetic pool.
So go ahead.
So you know what? The other thing is at the very top it says the quickest way. It doesn't say the only way, right?
The best way, the only way.
So if I was going to say 100%, I need to stack my cash, grind set, like not traditional conservative values, but more like the grind set values. These guys who just work 24 hours a day, that type of person. If I were going to say the quickest way, I could see some of that sort of being accurate. But I like, for instance, I want to be a high value man, but I don't need to go the quickest way. I also have a girlfriend, right? There are other things I do. I work in animal rescue. There's things that are not really helping me become a high value man, but I still do them.
I disagree with that actually, though, because we can get into the definition of a high. I think those actually do make you into more of a high value man,
right,
depending upon who's talking about it and depending upon what that definition
I think
actually means.
Before you had mentioned something about supply and demand. So I used to be a trader. Oh, I still am a trader. I was a professional trader for like 10 years, 8 years. In that time, the S&P 500 is not listed based on my opinion or my feelings or the morality of the 500 companies in the S&P 500. The price of the S&P 500 is a bid and ask where they meet each other based on only one thing: supply and demand. Period. So if we were going to define supply and demand as the way to define a high value man versus a high status man, I actually have a different definition for high status versus high value. For a high value man, when we say this, a person can be like, I am religiously fundamental, and I look at Dan Bilzerian and I think it's disgusting what he's doing. Dan is a friend of mine. When I look at Dan and I see these women fighting to hang out with him, it is, for me, from the supply and demand curve, it is clear to me that there's high demand for him, right? From a standpoint, if I was going to say I'm Muslim or Christian or some other fundamentalist, and I looked at him, I'd be like, well, now he's not a high value man because he dates multiple women. So in that case, what is the correct answer? The correct answer is it depends on who you are and what your context is. If I'm in Amman, Jordan, right, and I look at somebody, and let's say I have a wife and my wife has like breast implants. Somebody in Amman, Jordan might be like, that's haram. You're not supposed to be able to do that. That's terrible. You should. Right. So from him and his standpoint, he is completely accurate in his viewpoint of what a high value man is. And my viewpoint is different. And that's kind of also the point of the tweet, is that like when you try to nail us down, here's the problem, right? So the people who are main criticisms of us, and I have a lot more respect for Destiny and Sneeko after debating them a couple of days ago.
It was a great conversation. We'll show a piece of that. It was actually new.
So one of the things is red pill, right? So I don't think anyone can be red pill. I think you're red pill aware. I think that's all you can be. There's no red pill fucking. I didn't get a union card for red pill. I didn't get here's my red pill merit badge that I just got. It's just a concept. Like I believe in gravity from Principia in 1689 by Isaac Newton. It doesn't make me a gravityist, right? I just believe in these concepts. So now if I understand these concepts, but the thing is, it's ethereal. It's almost like a puff of smoke. I need something to hit. Well, I don't have anything to hit. Red pill is just sort of this amalgamation of ideas. Wait, here's a person to hit. Look at him. He's right here.
I am red pill. I'm not red pill adjacent. There's no escape for me.
So but the thing is, he has a book. I can hit the book. I can lift the book. I can open the book and criticize the book. And now what's another thing I have? I have a tweet. I can attack a tweet, and now I have a book, and now I have a person to attack. I had this puff of smoke that I couldn't attack, and now I have this specific thing that I can attack. And so because of
they
that,
want a villain.
That's what.
I mean, for me, the thing that was a challenge for me from the tweet actually was that it brought me into this whole, I'm very introspective and I think about these things. I watched a lot of content on it, and it became this issue of, okay, high value man, high value woman, do these things have an actual definition that we can all agree on? And you struggled to do that on Fresh and Fit. I watched the conversation. It was hard to get.
I think we did a better job of it on Fresh and Fit.
Or is it subjective? Because when you put in your tweet, I think the challenge for a lot of people was when you said do not get married, avoid family creation, and you didn't specify age for those two. I think for me, I looked at that. For me, a high value man is a family man, is somebody who has children, is someone who's a good father. That's a really important component of that for me. So if you weed those two, if I were to follow this advice, it doesn't fit the definition of a high value man as I see it, which led me into the space of like, okay, if everything is subjective, then how can anybody strive to hit that title, because there's a lot of guys that, we say strive to be a high value man, strive to be a high value man. What does that even mean if it's so subjective?
So even though it's subjective, it is still within a parameter. So for instance, the discussion of free will, sometimes you have in evolutionary psychology, is like, how much free will does a Homo sapien have? I can choose between vanilla and chocolate ice cream. I can't choose between vanilla and poop. Like, there's certain things I cannot choose. So Sneeko made the analogy. He says, well, in that case, the sports guy who weighs 500 pounds can be high value. I was like, no, under none of these circumstances is that high value. None of them. So the thing is, high value man is within a spectrum. Yes, you can have some different people in the spectrum. The thing is, you're going to talk about later about the difference between TradCon and Red Pill. There's a lot of people in Red Pill who are like, me having children can be good. Me not having children can also be good. But in TradCon, it tends to be me having children is the purpose for my existence.
Yeah.
And so those two things are different. So now we have two different definitions of what a high value man is.
But there's also the difference of like multiple women and separate. That's a very big difference.
Yeah, that's also. But if a man cures cancer and doesn't have any kids, like for instance, I'll tell you who one of my favorite high value men of all time is Isaac Newton, who died a virgin. Right? He never had any kids. And so one of the things is, what did he do? He invented differential calculus and found us and discovered gravity. To me, that would be a high value thing. But he didn't have any kids. Right. So like, how does that work? If you're a traditional conservative, well, then it doesn't work. And that's the thing. It's always going to be a perspective. But the thing is, he contributed something. Right? He wasn't a terrible person.
Yep.
So in that spectrum of different possible high value men, he's still in the spectrum. It's just when people go outside the norm and just start saying, well, that means anyone could. No, it doesn't mean anyone. There's certain things. For me, if you're going to ask my definition,
there's still a framework.
Yeah, it's going to be you date who you want. So if a man wants to date multiple women or wants to date one, as long as it's his choice because he has enough abundance, then that's high value. He has a job where he can create some kind of value and is scalable, and he does something that he enjoys. So if you're a salesperson, you go to work more, you make more money. Or if you're in my case, I have a scalable business where I can actually work with other people and then make money that way. That would be number 2. And number 3, are you physically fit? Physically fit should be number 1. Have you taken your own physical fitness into account? Because when you're 80, the only thing that's going to matter is those moments that you have left with your family, right? So those, to me, those would be just baseline. Those would be the things. So I didn't.
Do you pair like self-defense? Because to me, physically fit, I know a lot of guys who are really strong, but they could never defend you. They don't you watch them in the gym and they're just like, oh my God, they're punching in the air. Like, it's horrible.
They don't have the
so that's almost more important than being physically fit, is being able to defend yourself.
Yeah, but what happens then that means Ben, like, no offense, I could probably kick the shit out of Ben Shapiro. It doesn't mean that he's a low value man just because I'm bigger than him. So like one of those things, I don't know if that.
Where is
the
character piece here though? Can I ask that?
Where is this a great point? Because that's what we talked about before. Is like high value men, by the definition of supply and demand, some of them are fucking horrible people. Horrible. We use the Epstein analogy the other time.
Jeffrey Epstein, Sam Bankman-Fried, right? They still have lots of money. Epstein was how tall? But they're horrible people.
See,
but
I would disagree though and say they can't be high value then, because your character is a key component of that equation.
Thus further proving our point.
So again, like, is it what you bring to the marketplace? And when we talk about supply and demand, we talk about your value in terms of an exchange between people, what you can offer people, in terms of all of those things. But your character, if you are a horrible person and you've committed crimes or you've been engaging in it, your contribution to society, for me, despite how much money you have, is always going to be in the negative, because what are you really doing to help society at large?
I've been using this example recently. Now, you've probably heard me say this before, because I drew this straight out of Alpha God by Dr. Hector Garcia, which is high value men have powerful men over the course of history. You probably heard Tate repeat something similar to this, is that they have had 3 things that make them powerful, or the attributes. One of them is resources, territory, and then access to usually virginic, but not always virginic, fertile young women, so that they can reproduce and spread the seed. Okay, so those you can say, well, is that a high value man? Is that a powerful man? So we can look at that, but then we can look at an example of, say, somebody like Mahatma Gandhi or Dr. Martin Luther King, or even Carl Jung, if you'd like. They're not high value men in the sense that they had high earnings, especially with respect to Gandhi, but they made a significant impact in the world because of their lives, because of what they were doing. And all three of those men had multiple women in their lives, mistresses included. So how do they fit into the money, muscles, and game, scenario, or that trifecta of what makes for a high value guy? I would argue probably all three of those guys were not necessarily in the best physical shape of their lives, right? But they were still effective, and maybe it was character that you're talking about here. So arguably, whoever, depending on what your ideological bent is, you might say, well, they're low value or they're high value, whatever. But the thing is you can't say that they didn't have a significant impact on the world, and you can't say that they weren't necessarily quote unquote high value men within the context of what they were doing and what their character was.
Does this also apply to women? I'm curious. The concept of a high value woman and I don't use the term low value because I don't really, but in terms of a high value woman, because I can delineate for you what I think that looks like.
Sure.
But I don't know that it's terribly subjective. If we sat here, it feels to me like oftentimes when it's spoken of about high value men, at least now that this has all come out, your tweet has actually started a really important conversation in my view. About this, there's more subjectivity that's allowed in the conversation when it comes to the guys. But then when we look at women, I would say if you're, hyper promiscuous as a woman, that's not going to generate high value for you. If you're somebody who wasn't raised right by your parents, that's a problem. If you're somebody who doesn't have respect for your body, that's a problem. If you're somebody who doesn't pair sex with emotion, for me, that's a problem.
Sure.
We can all agree on that. And I feel like it's much more clear. And I wonder if that, there's a part of me that wonders if some of the guys, not you, I'm not speaking to you directly, but are there some guys in this space who want to make excuses for behavior that is not character-wise so good? So they'll say, and this gets into the discipline debate a little bit, discipline is important except here. High value is important for all these things, but not necessarily this character component because that's something I don't want to do. And I feel like we shouldn't be as forgiving. Either these terms are going to be subjective and there's going to be room to breathe to a degree, or they're not and they're fixed, and then we all have to kind of agree on it, because then if we look at a tweet like Rolo's and we're looking at it like a prescription, if we don't have a fundamental agreement about what high value means, then the whole thing kind of doesn't. It's very hard to make sense of any of it.
I'm going to be a pragmatist here. We'll never all have an agreement on what a high value man is.
If you like the short clip and want to watch the full episode, click here. And if you want to connect with me one-on-one on Connect, you're going to click right here. Let's get to talking.